So I just want to jump straight into it, but I do find this concept of morality in Hazbin Hotel and Helluva Boss and how that sends you to heaven or hell very interesting, because I am a Christian and it's clear that there's some Christian influence in this series, in the entire concept of hell. It clearly takes from Christianity. It doesn't take from Islam. It doesn't take from any other religion. And that's especially true because the world is 6,000 years old. So I've just taken an interest into this as a person who's watched a lot of both of these series, a person who's followed them both. So, one, why does morality matter? And there's a second part to this, but morality matters because Hazbin Hotel and Helluva Boss are both set in hell, which means there is a heaven. And generally, in the series, it's kind of been shown that bad people go to hell and good people go to heaven. But the issue with that is that calling someone a bad person or a good person is incredibly vague in most circumstances. Like, for example, if there's a guy who makes a lot of money on Earth off of hard work, for example, and he doesn't give to charity, is he a bad person? That's kind of a confusing thing, because him making a lot of money doesn't necessarily make him a good person or anything like that, but him not really doing anything other than just not donating to charity doesn't automatically make him a bad person, because most people don't donate to charity. So there can be awkward things like that, and there's also no sort of purgatory or thought of what purgatory may be to those who don't exactly understand what it is. And two, where do people born in hell get their morals? So in real life, in at least Western places, we are a post-Christian society, which means that a lot of our morals, or most people's morals, are generally loosely Christian based, but not necessarily Christian. So what I mean by that exactly is that we have general ideas of like what natural law is, even though we don't want to call it that sometimes, and stuff like that. What we get from the ideas of what's right and wrong, we get from, it originates from the Bible. That's just kind of how it is. People didn't just one day was like, okay, we don't need God to evaluate the fact that, I don't know, maybe robbing people is a little wrong, even if you're poor. That kind of thing comes from what we naturally know, gifted to us by God, because I'm a Christian. I fully believe that. And that's just kind of how it has been forever, even if we're kind of a post-Christian society. But in hell, there's no such thing as Christianity. Everyone is they're just running around like little gremlins. And for some reason, they have a similar sense of morality as we do. They think that things like cheating on your partner is wrong and stuff like that. Or, like, for example, if Moxie cheated on Millie tomorrow, then that would be seen as a very, very big thing that would be treated as a very serious thing in the actual Helluva Boss universe. Similar thing as if secretly, like, Serpentius was still evil and then he blew up the Hazbin Hotel. That would be seen as an evil thing, but that doesn't make any sense because hell is a fully evil place and it's supposed to contain all the bad people, right? That's what hell is supposed to be in this world. It's supposed to contain all the bad people. So why did the bad people give a crap, especially since they're post-judgment? That doesn't really make any sense at all. So here's two. What allows for someone to go to heaven or hell? So this is also another two-part kind of question. So what allows for someone to go to heaven or hell is basically kind of just based off of your own religion, though of course I believe, as a Christian, I believe that you have to accept Jesus Christ on top of a few other things, but that's the most simplified version of what I believe. For Islam, you have to accept that the Quran is true, basically, and that you have to live like Muhammad and hold him in high regard and stuff like that. Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm fully open to being corrected by if you're a Muslim and I'm just wrong about how to get to heaven. In real life, it's very sort of narrow. It's like you have to do these things specifically and you will go to heaven or hell. As according to like a more agnostic sort of view, it would be you generally have to be like a good person, like you have to do good things, you have to be like cool and stuff like that. But again, as I've already said, that's such a vague, weird thing that isn't defined at all. Nobody knows. There's no real counter to say what is a good person and what is not a good person. Again, like the rich guy example that doesn't give to charity. If I just keep to my own and I take care of my family and I do nothing else, and I'm not really helping society, Am I a good person? I mean, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do, right? That doesn't make me a good person automatically. But that depends on your subjective morals. So that means that by that sort of standard, you know, is it subjective if you get sent to heaven or hell in Helluva Boss based off of what other people think? That's why this is such a confusing thing, because nobody knows in the fandom what exactly makes someone go to heaven or hell. So part 2 of question 2, and does judgment from others in hell make sense? And I would say absolutely not. They have no basis to judge others off on at all, and especially because the morals are kind of just built off of like, okay, guys, don't do adultery, you know, do not cheat on your spouse. People in hells in these universes, their relationships and how they treat what's right and wrong is so inconsistent and weird. Nobody cares that there are multiple gang wars going on in the streets and that people are murdering each other left and right. But Blitzo has just done a few too many things, and so we're supposed to really take it seriously that this guy who was born in hell is being a bad person, and that everyone else around there has the moral superiority over him to judge him as a bad person. It makes absolutely no sense, because as he says himself, hello, we're in hell.
You are so fucking shitty! Do you hear yourself?
Everyone's shitty! Hello, we live in hell! Why am I all of a sudden the bad guy just for sucking at relationships?
Exactly. We are in hell. Why are people judging him for cheating on other people? Again, this is the final judgment place that all souls who, you know, in my view, doesn't accept Jesus Christ will end up, or Islam view, people who don't accept Islam, you know, stuff like that. This is where they're supposed to lay for the rest of eternity, man. Why in the world would people care about judging others for things like cheating but not murder in a place like this? You see what I mean? It doesn't make any sense at all. And when you think about it more and more, it just makes less and less sense. And this is especially because of my own personal religious beliefs on how heaven and hell work and what they are. I watch these and I just think, and the more I think, it's like, this is nonsense. You know what I mean? 3, what allows for someone to go to heaven or hell based off of common religious beliefs. I've already talked about this. The most known religions in the whole world, the most practiced ones, are Christianity and Islam, and I've kind of already explained a little bit on how you get to heaven in either one. So 4, why is the inspiration taken from Christianity so lackluster? See, this is kind of layered, because the entire foundation of heaven and hell is not based off of any other religion but Christianity. I mean, Adam from the Bible is the first man, and it's clear that Vivzi doesn't really know that much about Christianity or the Christian past and stuff like that. She didn't really do her research or anything. Maybe there will be other biblical characters in heaven or something like that. I know there's Saint Peter. I don't think Vivzi Pop even knew this, but it is true that we will get a body transformation in heaven, even though Peter was not a blue-eyed, blonde-haired white guy as he is in Hazbin Hotel. It is said in the Bible that God will transform our bodies into something more glorious once we enter heaven. So I guess that could be part of it. You could see it in that way, although there's no way Vivzi Pop even knew this, given the fact that she knows basically nothing about religion, based off of what we can see and how she deals with concepts in both of these verses. She could have researched different theological positions on how heaven is and how hell is, and maybe mixed them together, or with other religions as well. She could have mixed them together and made a way more interesting environment instead of just an uncomfortable, poor city that the entirety of hell feels like. The only really cool concept in Helluva Boss, or at least that's only in Helluva Boss, is the rings of hell. I think that that's actually super cool, because we have different layers based off of Dante's Inferno, you know, and she could have done more stuff like that, but she just doesn't. It's just generally like it's like you die and then you just end up in a random city. Like, what the hell? Why am I in a random city? You know what I mean? It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so number 5, why is hell just like the real world? So this is kind of a thing that I didn't really think about a lot while I was watching the show, but hell is effectively just real life, and that's what I don't understand. So there's a little bit of interesting things going on with the royalty and everything, and the 7 rings and all of that, but effectively we're just on Earth with the red sky most of the time, and that's what I don't exactly understand. Because you see, the reason why this is such a bummer is because Hazbin Hotel, Helluva Boss, got really big when it was new because the world building, the world seemed like it was going to be really interesting. Like houses going to be different than the real world. The Goetia family, like how are we going to explore all these different dynamics that Hell is going to bring forth? But instead, none of that really happens, and we just hit kind of a very generic bad city kind of place where it's like, okay, criminals just kind of live here. It's really lame, and she didn't even really have to take from this aspect. She doesn't even really have to take inspiration from other religions. She could have just made it more interesting. Like, what if hell was like a wasteland for people in Blitzo's position instead of just resembling the real world? That's what I don't understand. So 6, what happens when good people in hell die, and where do bad people in hell who die go? I want to answer the second question first. Where do bad people in hell who die go?
I'm gonna kill him.
Too late, Toots. Wait! Would that make me double dead? Where exactly do I go? To double hell?
So this is a question that has never been answered in all of the entire series. As in Hazbin Hotel, because Hazbin Hotel deals directly with going to heaven, or people in hell trying to get to heaven, people in hell trying to get their redemption, which is this, it's just this vague concept. It's a really vague, random, weird, undefined concept of becoming a good person, despite the fact that I'm getting a little bit off topic, okay? It's just, it doesn't make any sense when you actually think about it in any sort of. First of all, I want to raise questions that have never been answered. Do imps die of old age? Do people who are born in hell die of old age? Is it possible for people who die in hell who were born there to go to heaven? That's a big question. And if people who are born in hell are more neutral than anything, like if they die in childbirth or something like that, where do they go? My assumption is that these people are they just get respawned, basically. They get respawned somewhere in hell, and they're just like, okay. And that's why nobody really bats an eye as to all the murder that's going on in hell. But actually, that assumption is broken by the fact that everyone is really sad when Serpentius dies, which that kind of would, if Serpentius was just respawn in hell, that would mean that nobody would go away, and also that fully undermines the entire angel cleansing thing. So really, where do bad people in hell go when they die? Now, what I'm assuming is that they just go to darkness or something like that, like a place like Sheol. It's just dark, creepy, and all of that, and you can barely move, and it's cold. That's what I'm assuming, but there's been no evidence given by the show that that's where bad people in hell go to when they die, so we don't actually know. And also, just a little bit more on this, how in the world so if Hazbin Hotel or hell has existed for 6,000 years, as that was in the start of creation in Hazbin Hotel, 6,000 years I believe, then how in the world has no one from hell died and went to heaven before the existence of the Hazbin Hotel? That's what I'm wondering. That absolutely makes zero sense. And because there's been 6,000 years of possible people who could have died in hell to go to heaven, then how do people in heaven still not understand how people from hell get to heaven? Or how normal people even get to heaven in the first place? It absolutely makes zero sense at all. And what happens when good people in hell die? So Serpentius is not a good person. We think we have to remember the fact that, again, this guy was a warlord. He was shooting people in the streets. He was killing them. He was trying to murder as many people as possible. I mean, this guy had like an evil. He sided with villains to try and destroy the Hazbin Hotel and stuff like that. I mean, this guy had a whole warship. He tried to use the same warship that he killed thousands and thousands of people in hell on Adam. This guy's like a warlord. He's evil. Him going to the Hazbin Hotel and kind of changing his disposition a little bit and becoming a little more empathetic does not make up for the fact that he did all that bad stuff. So in Christianity, in Catholicism at least, basically whenever you die with something like rage or anger or some kind of serious sin that you're holding on to, not something venial, you get sent to Purgatory so you can be cleansed for an unknown amount of time to then go into heaven. And this is because nothing imperfect is allowed into heaven in the first place. And I say all of that to say, why wasn't Serpentius sent to purgatory or something like that, or some kind of realm, instead of straight to heaven, despite the fact that he'd still have to logically be in some kind of place to atone for all the bad things that he did if good people go to heaven. Everything Serpentius did was absolutely insane. Again, Warlord killed thousands of people and this guy deserves to go to heaven? Are you kidding me? That is actually insane. You can't just say sorry for that. He's ruined thousands of families potentially in hell. Really think about this. That's really absurd. Serpentius is a bad freaking person because of his actions, dude. But anyway, more about Purgatory. That could have been so interesting to explore too. What is Purgatory like in this world? You know what I mean? Are there people actually in Purgatory? Are they walking around waiting until they just go to heaven? Like, yes, I'm gonna go to heaven, and like they could have done some gags where they're just like walking around and talking in a big white void or something. And some guy checks his clock. He's like, yes, I'm gonna go to heaven in like 30 years. I'll see you guys there. That could have actually been funny, but no, it's because Disney Pop doesn't really know anything about Catholicism, Christianity, Islam, whatever. But anyway, what I was talking about was Serpentius, not a good guy, right? But he instantly gets sent to heaven because his disposition changes based off of vague factors that none of us know. Nobody actually knows what exactly a good person is. From my view, of course, I'm gonna take from my view a lot. I'm a Christian. This is a very clearly Christian influenced sort of show. But from my view, everyone is a pretty bad person. We've all done really bad things, and without God's forgiveness, we all deserve hell, basically. That's what I fully believe. So that means that there is no such thing as being a good person or anything like that, because you can't do something to make up for the other thing that you did in the past. That's just not how it works. But I guess that's how it works in Hazbin Hotel, because Serpentius killing all those people was forgiven by whoever runs heaven. We don't see Jesus, we don't see God, we see none of that. We see none of that. And we see none of that in Hazbin Hotel. That's what I don't understand. Also, another question that kind of is related is, why do they care? Why do the people in heaven care about hell's overpopulation? That doesn't make any sense to me. Why do they care about that? How the heck does that even affect them in heaven? And if hell is an infinite realm, how does it get overpopulated? It's a whole different, it's not even like Earth. So many stupid freaking sort of questions that are never answered in the actual show. It's annoying. And here's another thing that's pissing me off. The fact that they don't even show God at all in the very first intro. I just decided to rewatch it just so I can get a refresher on what they do. And while it is based on Christianity, the angels just worship this thing called good, even though the infinite goodness is God and God created the angels in the first place. And what confuses me is that there are angel elders. What the hell is an angel elder? That doesn't even make any sense. Can angels age and die of old age? If an angel dies, where does it go? Where did Adam go, huh? Did he go to hell when he died? Now, even more questions I'm asking now, because this is getting ridiculous. And they also shouldn't be scared of them because they know God and they worship him. They worship God, the infinite goodness, which means that they know that evil will never prevail. Why are they scared of hell, and why are they scared of its overpopulation? I've read online that they're secretly scared of hell uprising or something like that. When in the first place, the only known way, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only known way to get to heaven is through an angel coming down and opening a portal up to heaven. So how the hell are the people in hell going to get to heaven to start the revolt in the first place? These two realms could just completely never talk again and it'll just be fine. And a revolt also implies that these two realms are both talking to each other or something, or that one is oppressing the other, when that just isn't true. All heaven does to hell is be above it. That's it. There's no sort of angel suppression or anything. We're not in like 1984. There's nothing that would make it so that a revolt would make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Why would they even revolt? If they were never killing the people, the denizens of hell, why would hell even care about revolting? They probably wouldn't even know angels exist in the first place. The whole thing is very flawed and it just doesn't make any sense, and I haven't seen anyone ever talk about this at all. Enough of my tangent. This is annoying. Do you see what I mean? When you really start thinking about it, especially from an actually religious standpoint, it starts to make no sense. Okay, So what happens when good people in hell die? I don't know if I've already answered this, but effectively it seems like they go to heaven, but we haven't actually seen a good person who lived a good life by I guess societal standards die. And then we haven't actually seen that. What we've seen is a person who's been forgiven by some kind of unknown means or source. That being, again, Sir Pentious after he died to Adam's hands. So we've basically seen a person who was on the track of trying to be good. Here's what my assumption to this is, because this is really annoying. So I assume it was his dispositional change that made it so that he would go to heaven. That's what I assume. His disposition changed. He's no longer a warlord. Therefore, we can ignore all the previous things that he did in his life. That's what I'm assuming. So to finally move past question 6, it's question 7. Why don't people in heaven understand how to get to heaven? This fact doesn't make any sense, because if we look at someone like St. Peter, in real life, St. Peter was one of Jesus' apostles, which means that he devoutly followed him. Effectively, what this means is that since he was one of the most important people in church history, and because of that, he was sent into heaven, that means what he was doing, his cause, was good. Which means that Jesus Christ, what he was doing was good. Him claiming that he was God was good, and it must have been true for him to get this high position in heaven. Effectively, through this, we can understand that Christianity is good in this world and true, but that contradicts with the few things that happen later on. Because outside of this, if Jesus was lying, then Peter really just did bad. He just only did bad things, because he would have wasted billions, trillions, probably not trillions, but billions of people's time, life, all of that. That's kind of a confusing thing. You know, why is one of the most important Christians in history just used as a character here if it doesn't necessarily imply that you must accept Jesus Christ as your savior in order to get to heaven? That's what I don't exactly understand. Because if we look, okay, let's look at Paul, for example. If St. Peter is in heaven, that means that Paul is probably up there. And you know, back when Paul was Saul, he was murdering Christians, but he was just murdering Christians like left and right. He'd just go out for fun and kill them, and he would enjoy it. He just enjoyed killing people. That's what this guy did until he saw Jesus Christ and changed his mind and decided to become one of the most important people in Christian history. Without him, we wouldn't have the Bible. So that's kind of what I don't understand. Why is this not based off of accepting Jesus Christ if St. Peter is just right here? Why use the concept of Christianity but not the actual way to get to heaven when talking about this? That's what I don't get exactly. And also what makes this even more confusing is the fact that St. Peter, I just rewatched the scene, by the way. St. Peter uses a book to check the names of all the people who will be let into heaven. You might not have thought about that really, but what that means is that God already chose who's going to get into heaven and who's not going to get into heaven. That's exactly what that means. Basically, that means there isn't any free will, and everything has been predestined by the creator already within Hazbin Hotel, which goes against the Christian concept of free will. So that whole aspect doesn't make any sense. Effectively, what that means is that it seems like there isn't really anything that you can do to get to heaven, even though we already know that since St. Peter is here, we can comfortably assume that, you know, the events of Jesus Christ and all that happened, and the people who accepted Jesus Christ as Lord are also, you know, up in heaven with them. So now it makes it so that there's 3 confusing answers that are not exact, that are both either not answered, alluded to, or extremely vague. What that means is that to get into heaven in this world, you have to accept Jesus Christ just as St. Peter did, just as Paul did. At least I'm assuming Paul or Saul is in this world, which once you accept Jesus Christ, you know, life path changes. Like once you have the Holy Spirit in you, life path changes. You're on the track to heaven, basically. But that's not at all what's said in actual Hazbin Hotel. So I don't know if it's Jesus. It might be. 2, you have to be generally a good person. Now, what's confusing about this is the fact that, again, Sir Pentious is not a good person. We can like him, but we can also recognize the fact that he was not a good person. He was in hell, but he was sent to heaven. That doesn't make any sense. Or 3, nobody knows and God already predetermined every single person in Hazbin Hotel who will go to heaven or hell. For all 3 of those things, we don't actually know what the answer is, which is extremely infuriating when you're supposed to be writing a story about people who are trying to get to heaven. Now, I personally think that this story would have been way better if it had an actually religious tint to it instead of it just being like, okay, we just got to be a good person, because that would have made way more sense. Imagine if Charlie was trying to find who Jesus Christ is from the perspective of Lucifer's daughter and how to accept him and then go to heaven or something like that. Or imagine if it was a great criticism of or something like that on Catholicism and Christianity, because Vivsy Pop did her research, she started understanding how those religious systems work and everything, and so she decided to make the whole series an interesting criticism with an interesting story about if people in hell can be forgiven or not. But instead, we don't get that, and by the end of Hazbin Hotel, we don't understand how people get into heaven. It doesn't make any sense. So, 8. Do most people go to heaven, or do they go to hell, and what is that based off of? Again, I've already talked about this, but the question is I'm assuming that most people go to hell, which implies that most people are bad in this world, or that when they die, they died as a bad person. That's what I'm assuming that means. I'm not exactly sure. And how people got into heaven, what does it mean to die when you're good based off of subjective, vague morals that shift from person to person? It doesn't make any sense. So 9, how do I think people get to heaven or hell based off of what Hazbin showed us? So my assumption is fully based off of Sir Pentious and why he went to heaven. So what I assume is that Sir Pentious only went to heaven because he was both on the path of becoming better, I guess, and he died for a good cause, which is to save people. So effectively, to go to heaven in this world, it doesn't at all matter what you did in the past. You could have killed 100 people, you could be like Hitler or something like that, or you could have been like, I don't know, some kind of other freak that did tons of horrible things. As long the second that you just try to be a good person, whatever vague idea that is, once you earnestly put your mind to that, whatever vague idea of a good person that is, you're going to heaven. And while with Christianity, it is kind of similar, where if you earnestly decide to put your faith in Jesus Christ and you get baptized, of course, you're on the road to being able to go to heaven, basically. That's, from my understanding, that's basically what it is. There are some more things, like there's some more complex things, but if you're Protestant, it's basically just accepting Jesus Christ. I'm Catholic, so it's a little bit different, but yeah, you know, there are multiple schools of thought, but the main idea is just accepting Jesus Christ fully and earnestly. That is way less vague than just trying to be a good person at the moment of your death. What if you think what you're doing is good, but it's actually not, apparently? Like that's why it doesn't make any sense. It's a completely vague, nonsensical sort of way to get to heaven, based off of your societal standards at the time. So what that means, I guess, is that goodness is kind of just it's not a thing that's eternal. It's just kind of a thing that depends on where you are, which is completely, I'm at odds with that, you know. So yeah, that's what I was thinking. Hope that you thought this video was pretty interesting. I just wanted to find some kind of concept where I could talk about both my own religious beliefs, because I love Jesus Christ, and also talk about a show that is almost always on my mind for how interesting the world could have been, all the missed potential, all of that, and also because I do respect Hazbin Hotel and Helluva Boss creatively and what they stand for in indie animation. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be releasing more stuff about animation in general, and yeah, goodbye.